Thanks for staying with us. Let's stay with that conversation surrounding the controversies that has trailed the announcement of results, the governorship election and supplementary election in Adamawa State, with Professor Sylvester Heine, who is Professor of Political Science at the Lagos State University. He joins us virtually this morning. He is also a Stanford University Fellow on Democracy, Development and Rule of Law. Thanks for joining us this morning, Prof.
Thank you for having me.
Well, a lot has been said and comments are endless about the issues that have arisen as a result of the governorship election in Adamawa State. The president-elect, the governor and governor-elect of Adamawa State have both called for probes, and quite a number of people are looking in the same direction. What are the issues for you, Prof?
Let me make a point. That point is that Nigerian electoral scene is full of many dramas, and this particular case takes the issue to a very absurd level, very absurd level. Disruption of the electoral process, the question about transparency, fairness, and integrity, were quite the crisis that we saw in Adamawa. Of course, matters have gone to the court, so but it has to do with the propriety of the electoral process, transparency, fairness, and integrity. These are issues that are big, because when you talk about election, the most important issue in election is the certainty, of the term, that when you vote, your vote will count. That issue, and all that played out, tend to undermine those, vital issues in the electoral process.
So with the two politicians calling for probe and several other people are looking in that direction, some civil society organizations have also made the same appeal and calling for probe, calling for prosecution and all of that. Exactly how, do you see that happening? Because looking at Section 25 of the Electoral Act, that's very clear on who declares what results. There is no penalty, so to speak, stated as to what the offense or penalty should be in the event that someone else performs that function. So exactly how do you see that going?
Well, I think that the has provisions, for sanctions against electoral recruitment. So the question about somebody announcing the result and not the announcing the result does not arise. What is important here is that the provisions of the electoral act should be activated, and of course punishment. I can point to the relevant sections, but there are relevant sections, within the electoral act that spell out, punishment for electoral infringement in whatever way, it is done.
Well, Prof, we sincerely apologize to you, our viewers, for the poor audio quality. We're working on it to ensure that you get it better. But, Prof, when you say the Electoral Act is explicit, I'm actually wondering where this particular infraction is discussed as well as the penalty for it.
I think it's your own personal interpretation to say somebody is announcing or performing a task that is not his responsibility. It's a rude intrusion, an abrupt usurpation of the role of another officer. But so you are disrupting the electoral process. You are disturbing stability in the process. And so it's about trying to explain it away. The law is very clear. a process is being truncated, you know, by what they call a clopper, you know, and overzealous official, you know, of the Independent Electoral Commission. In this case, the Resident Electoral Commission in Adamawa State.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, when you put it that way, because that's on the one hand, and we have also seen that in that same process, it's not just the resident electoral commissioner that was involved in this case. The IGP has also literally dealt with, if we can use the term, perhaps begun the process of involving the security officials who are involved. I also understand that the NSCDC commandant has also called to order one of his men who was also at that venue. Exactly, I don't know, is there anything the security officials could have done? Because the understanding we have is that as far as they are concerned, they are not supposed to be involved in the process as well, but here we are. Is it in any way for you opening up a completely different tangent in our electoral process that we've not looked at before, or you thought maybe the security officials could have done something that they didn't do at that time?
What the fact that the approach strategies of the security officials that were there, actions of their own, meant that they started in ways.
Prof, just one second. Sincere apologies that the audio is rather difficult to keep. I'm pretty sure that we're working on it right now to make it better. But right now we also have Mr. Falana, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria, joining us in this conversation. Good morning, Mr. Falana.
Good morning.
How are you? Very well. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let me ask you perhaps one or two of the same questions that I asked Prof the other time. For you, as far as this Adamawa governorship and supplementary elections are concerned, what are the issues? A number of people and groups of people are calling for probes. For you, what are the issues?
No, it's not a matter of probe. The law is very clear on these matters. Number one, under Section 120, subsection 4 of the Electoral Act, any false declaration of results of elections anybody involved is liable to be prosecuted, and the penalty is 3 years imprisonment, which for me is not stringent enough. Secondly, there is also Section 121 of the Electoral Act, which prescribes 12 months imprisonment for financial inducement with regards to election. Because there are allegations there that some, I think about some of 2 billion must have exchanged hands. So it's not enough for the candidate of the APC, Madam Binani, to deny. There must be an investigation. Could these things have happened in the normal course of events? Was there inducement? That has to be investigated. The officers that were on the high table with Mr. Harry, Yunus Harry, the Commissioner of Police, the Director of State Security Service, and I think the Commander of the, I think another agency.
The NSCDC, Mr. Falana, an NSCDC official.
The Nigerian Defense Security Corps. I mean, all these guys are involved in the criminality that occurred. So they all have to be tried under the law. It's not enough for the Inspector General of Police to simply deploy the Commissioner of Police involved, or for the Director of the State Security Service to be withdrawn from that state. We must make an example this time, because this is not the first time that has happened. There have been false declaration of results before now. In 1983, that plunged Ondo State, the Ondo State, into a major violent eruption. In 2003, many false results were declared. In fact, some that could not be declared on ground in the state capital, President Olusegun Obasanjo ordered Professor Morris Iwu to declare them in Abuja. So we must find out what has happened this time so that this terrible experience will not be repeated in the history of our country. Good enough. The national leadership of INEC moved speedily. Otherwise, the situation will have, the crisis will have been so terrible for all of us, and particularly for the people of Adamawa State. And that is why
Mr. Falana,
we must not allow this matter to be handled rather cavalierly.
well, Mr. Falana, if the resident electoral commissioner can be punished in line with the electoral law, what laws will be guiding the punishment that will be meted out to the accomplices now, so to speak, the police official, the NSCDC official that were with him during that illegal declaration?
By the provision of the law. There's provision for conspiracy. If you conspire with anybody to make false declaration of result, you are liable to be prosecuted. The NTA must be brought in. The NTA televised the acceptance speech of the candidate of the APC. The candidate of the APC has to be brought in because she was party to the whole declaration, false declaration. Otherwise, acceptance speech would not have been ready and be delivered.
But Mr. Falana, you know that she has since denied some of the allegations leveled against her following that declaration, particularly that from the DSS official captured in a video saying that, alleging that he had been bribed with 2 billion naira, so to speak, to compromise the election.
No, my position on that is that the EFCC and the ICPC will have to be brought in to investigate. I'm not accepting the allegation for now. More so, that he made the statement while he was being tortured by a crowd. So we need to investigate and get to the root of the matter. So in that case, I'm not accepting that money exchange hands, and that is why I'm calling for investigation. But with regards to the acceptance speech delivered by Madam Beneni, there has to be an she's liable to be prosecuted under Section 120 of the Electoral Act.
Let's take a closer look at the position of the federal government. We heard the Minister of Information say yesterday after the Federal Executive Council meeting that the resident electoral commissioner is a member of staff of INEC, and as such, INEC is the one that's supposed to take responsibility for the punishment of the erring rec. But if we look closely at the process by which resident electoral commissioners assume office in the first place, their appointments have to be approved in a process, starting with the federal government and then with the National Assembly. So how strong is that statement by the federal government?
So with profound respect, I want to believe that the president has not taken an action because he's currently out of the country on a tour of Saudi Arabia, and I think he also wants to perform, the Hajj, but the statement is not correct. Under the Constitution and under the Electoral Act, the appointment of a resident electoral commissioner is made by the president, and the nomination will have to go to the Senate for approval. And that was what happened in November last year with respect to the 19 electoral commissioners appointed last year. Unfortunately, some of us cried out with respect to all those who were appointed at that time. We made it clear that the nomination should be, we wanted the Senate to reject majority of the nominations because it was published, I think, by Sahara Reporter in details who has nominated who among the 19 resident electoral commissioners, and we did say that they were not likely to deliver. Of course, this is one of them. So the appointment, INEC cannot go beyond suspending him.
Mr. Falana, are you still with us? Hello, Mr. Falana.
Since he's not very sure.
Okay, he's back.
The president arrived the country by the weekend. He would do the needful by requesting the Senate to remove him.
Now, let's take a look at Madam Binani's case at the court. She has approached seeking judicial review and, in fact, sought an ex parte motion requesting stay of action on the process. What's the strength of this case? Particularly, is it in any way drawn from Section 149 of the Electoral Act, which some are quoting and as a result saying that the declaration by the resident electoral commissioner is in order? Has she perhaps drawn her case from that portion of the Electoral Act?
Those who refer with profound respect, I've read the law rather upside down. Section 149 presupposes an action taken by the appropriate authority. So if a journalist, if a reporter, or any other person has made a declaration, a false declaration of research, are we going to clap for him and say it's covered under Section 149? The point being made here is that there was a returning officer, a professor, who is saddled with responsibility to make the announcement. Somebody hijacked that position. Somebody usurped his authority and made a false declaration. Section 149 does not come in because the whole exercise is an illegality ab initio. So what has to happen now is that the Nigerian Bar Association has to come in because Sir Harry is a lawyer, a senior lawyer, a former member, he was even a secretary of a branch of the NBA. So the NBA has to write a petition to the Legal Practitioners Disparate Committee for immediate sanction to serve as a lesson because this guy has brought the legal profession into disrepute. Secondly, the IG will have to speed up the investigation. By now, we expect him to have been arrested. And if he cannot be found, they have to get a court order to declare him wanted. 3, all the officers, the security officers that were involved in the charade will have to be investigated and prosecuted. And lastly, the president will have to send a request to the Senate next week that I want to remove this guy. I sought your approval to appoint him in line with the same law. I now want to remove him because he has betrayed the Constitution. He has betrayed the sort of office. And unless we do that this time around, we're not going to get out of this crisis.
What, Mr.
In 2009, in Ekiti State, Madam Adebayo, I think the President Electoral Commissioner there, came out to tell the whole world, my conscience will not allow me to make this false declaration. Eventually, she was corralled into making the false declaration. It took time before it was set aside by the Court of Appeal. This time around, the law, by virtue of Section 65 of the Electoral Act, INEC is empowered, and that was what happened this time around. INEC moved in, set aside the legal announcement of results because people have not appreciated the extent of the criminality. Collation was still ongoing. It hasn't been concluded.
Well, Mr. Falana, just one moment, because I also believe that my colleagues in Abuja would like to come in on this conversation. But just to be clear, I mean, you've already said, that this probe is very important, investigation is important, prosecution is important, and all of that. But you've also cited the fact that we've had these cases over time, and no significant progress has been made, action taken to deter anyone over time. And you've also made it clear that the person to take on this is the IGP. Just to be clear, what should the process be? Just a moment, Mr. Falana, just a moment. You said earlier that the president made the appointment. You've also mentioned a job for the IGP, so to speak. But you also made it clear the other time that this fellow works with INEC. So what should the process of this retribution, if I can use the term, be? who does what first, and what should the sequence be, you know, in order to take on those 4 or 5 issues that you
suggested? They have to be taken together. One, the INEC has done the right thing by suspending him. Please stay away for now, so that you do not further taint the democratic process. It is now left for the president. The president has a challenge to now embark on his removal via the Senate. Secondly, the investigation that will have to be conducted by the IGP, contrary to the request of INEC, the IGP cannot prosecute him because he has committed an electoral offense. By virtue of section 145 of the Electoral Act, that duty, statutory duty to prosecute all electoral offenders, that duty is imposed on INEC. So once the INEC gets the report from the IGP of the investigation, all the suspects will have to be arrested and prosecuted by the INEC. By the INEC. Happily this time around, the NBA has come in to collaborate with INEC. The anti-graft agencies are also collaborating with INEC for us to stop this menace, this colossal embarrassment, and this national disgrace. But again, it is not correct to say that attempts were not made in the past to bring those who engage in false declaration of result to book. I remember, I think last year, 2 years ago, the immediate past rec of Akwa Ibom State, Mr. Mike Igini, wanted to put an end to this kind of disgraceful conduct in Akwa Ibom State. So 2 professors engaged in making false declaration of result in favor of a particular politician, a notorious serial breaker of the law. And one has been jailed. One was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. One professor, Okon, you can Google, the name is there. The other one is standing trial. But unless we make it a national affair, and happily this time around, the INEC has decided to ensure that all those who were arrested and some who are yet to be arrested are prosecuted this time around. The police arrested 781 electoral offenders. The EFCC arrested over 100, inducing voters. ICPC made arrests. Other agencies made arrests, including the armed forces. This time around, we are sitting down to say this level of gross impunity cannot continue. And that is why some of us are collaborating with the INEC and the Nigerian Bar Association to ensure that all those who are indicted are brought to book.
Mr. Falana, let me come in here. You've spoken about the president, you know, writing a letter to the Senate to say that he would like to remove the resident electoral commissioner, that the president has a duty to do that at this moment. It means then that you do not agree with Mr. Lai Mohammed, who is the Minister for Information, who spoke yesterday talking to pressmen at the Villa after the Federal Executive Council meeting, when they wanted the stance of the presidency, so to speak, on what has transpired in Adamawa. I think Mr. Lai Mohammed said, oh, he's a staff of INEC, and only INEC has a responsibility to deal with whatever infractions, that the presidency doesn't intervene in those kinds of situations. It will appear that you disagree with him. Is that correct?
Marque, it's not a staff of INEC. He's a public officer. He is an official of INEC. And that point will have to be made very clear. It's like a judge. If there is a strong petition against a judge, and the NJC, National Judicial Council, carries out an investigation, and the judge is indicted, the NJC will place the judge on suspension and send his recommendation to the president, who is the appointing authority. So this time around, the INEC has no power under the law to remove a resident electoral commissioner because he was not appointed by INEC. So it's not like a lawyer in the legal department of INEC or a secretary, appointed by INEC. This fellow or resident electoral commissioner, like national commissioners, are appointed by the president with the approval or the endorsement of the Senate. So if you are going to remove any of them, it has to go through the same process. INEC does not have the power, and if the president does not do so, as soon as he comes back to the country, I can assure you by next week, we have to go to court to ensure that Mr. Yunusa Hari is removed without any further waste of time.
Well, it is unclear where the whereabouts of Mr. Ari is right now, because so far so good. The police say they're investigating. It's not clear whether he's in police custody, whether he's been arrested. Well, we do know that INEC has written a letter they're saying that they're writing a letter to the SGF to ask the appointing authorities to do something about his unwholesome behavior. They've also written a letter to the Inspector General of Police asking them to to investigate and prosecute Mr. Ari. Don't forget that the PRO of the police had said that, they were investigating, but they were also waiting for INEC to direct them on how to proceed, and it appears that letter has come so far. But I want to ask you if you're satisfied with the processes following from when that incident occurred, when that false declaration occurred, to where we are right now. Are you satisfied with the processes that have ensued, or do you think that the steps that were taken should have been taken even faster, or do you think that there were steps that were missing from that collision point?
Well, on the part of the INEC leadership in Abuja, this time around, I think for me, so far so good. The challenge before the Inspector General of Police is to have this guy arrested, and if for any reason it cannot be found, they have to get a court order to declare him wanted, because he has committed a very serious offense, which cannot be taken lightly. Secondly, there are other dramatic personnel who are walking free, those who colluded with him, those who conspired with him to make a mockery of the democratic process, in Adamawa state. And now they should be arrested. It's not just about deployment. Now, and I hope, I want to believe that the Inspector General of Police, the chairman of INEC, are taking steps. But I think they also are advised to look at the law. As I said earlier, yes, the police will investigate and turn in a report. The report will have to be forwarded to INEC, because INEC is the only authority under Section 145 of the Electoral Act that is the only authority empowered to prosecute elected. Mr. Ari did it the first time. Unfortunately, he wasn't deployed at that stage. But now, in fact, nothing can happen to him. He then, recruited security people to give him protection. In making the first announcement, those security officers have to be brought in. The lady involved that delivered an acceptance speech will have to be brought in. The NTA that engaged in illegal broker will have to be brought in. If we're dealing with channels, if the channels had made that broker by now, the NBC will have asked you to pay 20 million naira or thereabout, or even close down your station for a number of days. So the law must be even. Criminal suspects must be treated equally. Otherwise, yes, these channels will not broadcast this. So let me go to NTA next time. And that is the only way to run a country under the rule of law.
Well, Mr. Falana, if there's anything that this entire exercise, the Adamawa governorship election saga has done, it has, placed a huge question mark on the recruitment process of resident electoral commissioners. And you have rightly pointed out at the beginning of your commentary that, there were concerns raised at the time prior to the election about the appointment of resident electoral commissioners. So how more rigorous can the process be, to ensure that their integrity, their professionalism checks out, before they take up that office?
Well, you see, in the interim, we simply have to be vigilant. As I did say, information was made available to the Senate last time. Again, maybe I think the civil society didn't do enough. As soon as a presidential aide, I think Madam Onochi, was not approved by the Senate, I think people went back to sleep. Hence, the 19 electoral commissioners, their nominations were approved last year. The Senate simply ignored the valid objections that were raised. And that is why we're in this dilemma. So, before we amend the law, we need to be vigilant, because, as is often said, vigilance is the price of liberty. So that all of us will stand up at all times when we have manifestations of impunity.
Well, Mr. Falana, just one last one. And you already began by spading it and saying we all should be vigilant. Now, as you said, it's not the first time we are having such scenarios on our hands, but this is where we are at this time. What lessons can we say has to be learned in this process? There's another election towards the end of this year. What lessons would you say has been learned, and how do we instrumentalize those lessons into our processes so we don't have to come here again?
Yeah. Now, you guys in the media will have to help. For instance, even some of my colleagues are not aware that a professor was jailed in Akwa Ibom last year, 3 years imprisonment. That another professor is standing trial. These are all returning officers. And ASU has repeatedly maintained that it does not have any hand in the appointment of these professors who go around messing up the university system. So for me, let us make an example this time around, so that all those who are indicted in the crisis in Adamawa State, members of the political class, electoral officers, security officials, they all have to be prosecuted, and successfully too, and speedily too. Once that is done, those who are going to manage the elections that are going to take place later in the year will have to be mindful of the fate of those who manipulated the electoral process. I'm also aware that some electoral officers, some resident electoral commissioners have been successfully prosecuted by the EFCC for collecting money and distributing money to alter the result of election. Again, the press must help us to publish the reports so that people will know that impunity must end in our country. The last one, most people again are not aware that Professor Morrissey, who left, I think, the INEC in 2011, completed his term in 2011, is standing trial for money laundering to the tune of 1.3 billion naira. Money allegedly collected to make a mockery of the democratic process. So we need to let people know that these trials are ongoing. The ones that have been concluded, we must let people know that we have made some progress. We must also encourage the ongoing move by INEC and the NBA, Nigerian Bar Association, to prosecute all those who have been arrested. Some of the governors who are losing their immunity in May.
Okay. Well, one can only expect, Mr. Falana, I mean...
The governors who engage in electoral malfeasance,
yeah,
under the cover of immunity, will lose their immunity on May 29. Those guys will have to be brought in. I know one of them. You know,
all right.
in his state,
yeah,
over 10 people were killed.
Well, Mr. Falana, it's very interesting.
Election petition.
My apologies, because we've completely run out of time, Mr. Falana. You know, one other question that just remains that cannot be answered now is what the role of the people should be in the event that such a thing would attempt to rear its head again. Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you so much for your time, thoughts, and perspectives this morning.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Well, back right after now to take this a little further, get another perspective to it. To stay with us. Thank you. We still have with us Professor Sylvester Akane, who is Professor of Political Science, Lagos State University, and Stanford University Fellow on Democracy, Development, and Rule of Law. Prof, again, thank you so much for being with us. I hope we have better audio now. So, now, you've listened to Mr. Femi Falana as well, I presume, and a number of issues that some people have also raised is along the line of given the issues that have been raised about the REC and all of that, and the fact that, you know, he's appointed by the president, and the federal government is saying we really we don't have any business interfering in this matter because the resident electoral commissioner is a staff of INEC. Indeed, what do you think of that statement made by the Minister of Information and Culture? Is there anything the federal government should have done or could have done or do now? Prof, can you hear me? Okay. Sincerely, we're hoping that we'll be able to get better audio this time around from Prof, but unfortunately we cannot. Hopefully some other time we'll be able to take him on. Professor Sylvester Akane is a professor of political science, Lagos State University, as well as a Stanford University Fellow on Democracy, Development, and Rule of Law. Thank you so much, Prof. Well, we're back right after now to take on another issue entirely. Do stay with us.